Next, to tell us how tourism businesses can become more accessible, I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, who is CEO of Tourism Council of Western Australia, Mr. Evan Hall.
Thank you everyone for the invitation to be with you today. So far in the conference we've heard a lot about the accessibility improvements and opportunities, but the focus has largely been on capital cities, large capital, be they cruise shipping, hotels, airlines and airports. What I wanted to do was focus in on the other part of tourism, if you like, what happens within the destination, the hundreds or thousands of small businesses that make up the tourism experience, and in our case, particularly regional businesses in Western Australia. I'm going to talk to you today about a program we've been running for about a year now with some success, aimed at that part of the tourism sector. But to go through it, I'll just start off with a little bit of background about our organisation and about our destination. So Western Australia is it's one of the 8 states in Australia. And most importantly, it is, while it's a mid-sized state in terms of population, it is the largest state geographically, which provides us with huge transport accessibility issues. It is also very much a resources state. It is not dependent on tourism. Tourism is a second-level industry within the state, but still a significant industry, and we get about 12 million overnight visitors each year. Just to give you a sense of the geographic scale, that's the Emirates, to scale within Australia, and in particular you can see there on the left Western Australia, which is the state that I'm responsible for. And it's that scale, while we have great relatively accessible connections into Perth, our capital city, it is the transport access around the state to the very typically unique natural areas in the regions that is one of the great challenges for us. As for our organisation, I represent some 1,700 tourism businesses across Western Australia, public and private sector. And most importantly, we embrace all of tourism, all of the tourism value chain. I think it's been described, which really makes up the journey, the itinerary, the destination for the visitors. So it's accommodation, hospitality, events, tours, attractions, everything that the visitor experiences as part of their journey. And at least in Australia, in our experience, but I think worldwide as well, most of these businesses are in fact very small businesses. Sole traders, micro businesses. Our most common business model is a 2-person partnership, often providing the 4-wheel drive experience in the national park, the marine vessel in the marine park, for example. Very small tourism businesses. We operate as the peak body for those businesses and regions, and what we mainly do is deliver business capacity building and product development programs designed for those small businesses. And we do that through what we call the Quality Tourism Framework. It's an online program, it's a national program. We've got some 10,000 businesses nationally who use it, and it's accessible to all of those small businesses, and it's a development tool that each of them can use. And most importantly, it's focused on the tourism business. It is not issue by issue. We don't deal with sustainability or accessibility or customer service or how to develop your product for a particular international market, because it's about the business operation. So it's all integrated, but you can specialise in different areas. It's about the quality of the experience for the guest. And we very much see accessible tourism as being part of the sustainability of the commercial business operation. All right, so I've got some definitions up here. We could probably spend all conference talking about different definitions of accessibility and inclusiveness. These are the definitions from Tourism Australia, which is our peak marketing body. I'll just let you read that, but I think the 2 issues that we've drawn out of that definition that's at the heart of our program is first of all is that becoming an accessible tourism business is an ongoing endeavour. You do not move from being non-accessible one day to being accessible the next day. It is a constant process of improving your product, your understanding, your training, your staff, your skills, and it's there to embrace everyone and not just those who immediately come to mind from most businesses' perspective of guests with mobility needs, but a whole wide range of accessibility requirements for the business. So from our perspective, we approach it in 2 ways. First of all, in terms of the destination and the product and the services, We look at it at the destination level, where we're looking at the amenities, parks and precincts and destination marketing. And that is predominantly, in Western Australia at least, done by government or public bodies or agencies that might run our national parks, for example, look after heritage sites, are responsible for broad public and transport infrastructure. But the majority of the experience is in fact delivered by businesses, as I said before, predominantly small businesses who provide the accommodation, the B&Bs, the pensioners, the tours, the vehicles and vessels that provide access to our very large state. So that's from the destination perspective. From the guest perspective, it's being inclusive of all physical limitations, disability of age. And I think one of the great learning processes for us that we're trying to take the small businesses through is that accessibility is very much an individual thing. Everyone has their own individual accessibility needs. Those needs are changing. Those needs change for people as they go through their lives. And we see different things from different types of visitors. And to try and say accessibility is about one particular type of requirement or need is to absolutely miss the point. Fundamentally, we need to orientate the business to address the individual accessibility needs of individual guests. We did, however, break it down into 6 main areas to focus on, and this is part of the online program, the Quality Tourism Framework, as I mentioned before, that businesses can work their way through. We did some surveying of particularly our domestic market. These Australians who make up around about 75% of the travellers and visitors within Western Australia. But we get a fairly common response. Most of the research that we've seen, 30% of our visitors indicate that they have an accessibility requirement, some of them more than one accessibility requirement. And if we have a look at this breakdown of those 6 areas, you can see it's fairly broad range. Again, we focus on the individual, but we have grouped it in these areas so we can get down into the detail for those individual guests. So we put together the Accessible Tourism Program. As I say, it's an online part of the Quality Tourism Framework sustainability program. It's part of our Sustainable Tourism Accreditation. That includes anything from the cultural experience, the recognition of our First Nation peoples in Western Australia, through to emissions reduction and, of course, accessible tourism. As far as the Accessible Tourism Program goes, there's a couple of core features. Firstly, and I'm going to go through this in a little bit of detail, there's an online assessment and benchmarking. It's absolutely a critical component. Each individual business goes through their business in a comprehensive manner to assess their current level of accessibility. From that, they then produce a guide which provides detailed information for the guest. And if they do meet certain standards in some of those areas, they can be accredited, or I think certification is an expression that's been used. And we also use our awards program, which is very popular amongst the businesses, to celebrate those who have made considerable success in developing their accessible tourism product. My colour schemes are all over the place. But we've broken this down to 6 stages, but I do want to emphasise it's an ongoing process for every business. The first and the most important is assessment. There is then benchmarking your current accessibility against best practice standards. It's producing information for the guest based on that assessment. And then it's up to each individual business to work out how they can enhance their standards to meet that best practice, and then to promote that through the right channels to the right markets. So I'll just focus in on the assessment stage. Each tourism business undergoes its own assessment. They must own the understanding of how their business works and is accessible for each guest. It is not I think I'm accessible. They go through dozens and dozens of questions. It is yes or no. It is putting in measurements. It is uploading photographs and providing detailed understanding. Depending on the size of the business, most businesses, this takes about 2 hours to do. If we're talking about a small number of vehicles or vessels or a smaller property, the larger the property, the larger the business, it does take a bit more time. But we have partnered with a group called Spinal Life Australia, who also provide visits as part of the program for those guests who want to, for the businesses to get more of that lived experience so they can see the perspective of the guest. But we are very much focusing on making sure the business understands its own accessibility. At the end of the day, these are generally 2-person operations and they need to understand what their guest needs. It's got to be built right into their understanding of their own business. These are just screenshots from what the program's like. As I say, it takes about 2 hours to go through to do that assessment. That then leads you to the benchmarking stage. And you can get that assessment, and it will basically rate your performance. It's not unlike a star ratings program, which you might be familiar with. In each of those areas, it's broken down into great details. As I said, about 2 hours of assessment. It goes on and on and on. It is incredibly detailed, but that's the level of information that you need, and it does show you what's essential and what's desirable. And as I say, you can upload data such as images and so on to complete that assessment. Which brings us to the information stage. And when we first started doing the program, my first instinct was that, well, we need to improve and enhance the accessibility, how we're going to pay for the equipment and so on that's going to do that. But certainly part of our learning was just how important it is just to get to the stage of providing detailed information for our guests about just what level of accessibility is within the business. How challenging it is for people to even plan their journey, the amount of time it spends planning their journey. Can I get from where I live to, say, Perth? Can I get from Perth to Broome in the Kimberley, which is about a 3-4 hour flight away? Can I get round that destination? Can I go on the camel treks on the Sunset Beach? Can I meet one of the Aboriginal communities in the area? How can I do that? That would take dozens and dozens of phone calls, searching for websites for information that just isn't there about whether or not I can undertake that journey given my individual needs. Our main ambition is to provide detailed information for every tourism business in the destination, to provide that information so the guest, particularly the free and independent traveller, can find that information quickly and make that short and sharp assessment. Yes, I can do this, or yes, I could do this if I had assistance in this fashion, and to take the next step. Provision of information, accurate, detailed, comprehensive information is the main goal of the program. And in that area, we're doing very well. We're up to several hundred businesses that have now published that guide. And of course, that's, we have a web link so we can distribute that information through destination marketing organisations. And no doubt that information will be scraped by some of the artificial intelligence and other online tools that we talked about yesterday. But unless that detailed information is there, there's no way that, that we'll have IT solutions. Someone's got to go through and do that assessment business by business. For those who do reach best practice, as I say, first and foremost, we give them these several badges. The first badges is for accessibility information available and to make sure that people are aware that the information is there. But if they do meet best practice standards in several areas, we'll point that out. But it is one of the challenges. If you promote yourself as being, wheelchair friendly, does that actually mean anything to the individual? Everyone's got their own individual needs. It's the background information behind that that you can actually make that assessment. Otherwise, you could well be making a false promise. So the real focus is providing the detailed information so the guests can make their own assessment. And of course, we do promote it. One of the big steps forward that we did, we created, and we're going through nationally for the first time, an Accessible Tourism Award. And that was really to celebrate the success of a tourism business in creating accessible tourism products. So we do have that specific award. But our awards program, which is over 50 years old now, we do have some 25 different categories for different types of tours, cultural heritage tours and so on. And we now have accessibility as one of the key criteria in every single one of those categories. It's not about being an accessible tourism business, it's about being a great cultural tourism experience that is accessible. So it's through that awards program that we've actually delivered a lot of the enthusiasm and the motivation for the tourism businesses to get involved. Fundamentally, the businesses get involved for one of three reasons. One, because they are compelled is probably too strong a word, but they're expected to, either to get their licence to operate on public land or through some other form of government regulation. Secondly, a lot of them are simply motivated to provide a much better guest experience. But thirdly, we're trying to engender a sense of competition and excellence, and we use the awards program to promote that excellence, and it's been very successful about getting businesses involved. Okay, so I just want to finish up on 3 case studies of 3 very different businesses that have gone through different experiences. Off the Beaten Track is a small group of women. There's 4 owners of the business who specialise in providing guiding tours through some of the national parks in Western Australia, and they show off the cultural and natural diversity of the area. And they've really focused on providing a whole range of different experiences for guests. They're still on their core business. Their core business is providing an emotional connection with the land, with the natural environment, but they've made their business accessible either by working with the National Park to create particularly wheelchair-friendly trails, but also they've particularly invested in training for their guides to provide a really good experience and with great success. Sorry, I should go back one. Bustleton Jetty is the longest jetty in the Southern Hemisphere, one of the claims we make very often. A little shy of 2 kilometres long. It's a wooden jetty. It's heritage listed, but at the end of the jetty there is an underwater observatory. It's in the Geograph Bay. It's another natural wonder. And it's an amazing experience, but getting out to the end of the jetty, 2 kilometres on a wooden jetty is very difficult. So we've invested in new equipment out there, and particularly a lift to take a range of guests down to the underwater observatory. This was a real challenge because it's heritage listed, and the ability to do anything both in the waters there and to the heritage listed jetty was in fact extremely difficult. But it took a lot of work, pushed by the business, not by the government agency, to ensure that heritage experience could be adapted, particularly for those with mobility challenges. And the last one is the Arena. This is an entertainment centre here in Perth. Handles about 14,000 guests, primarily for music and sporting events. And they've invested a lot in sensory rooms and the like for their guests with autism, or particularly guests with children who are autistic or with cognitive needs, and just the ability for guests to know that they will not have to leave, that they can go to one of the sensory rooms if things become a bit too much, and take some time out and then return to the concert has been incredibly popular. These are just 3 of the businesses that have gone through our program in Western Australia. As I said, we're up to several hundred now who have now gone through and made that assessment, and we've got the information online. And we're now really going through the process of talking to government and others about, well, having identified what the accessibility needs, how can we now go through the process of enhancing the accessibility. That is probably the most challenging area. The first goal is to make the information available. The second part does take investment. And we often find ourselves, particularly with areas of natural or cultural heritage, where it's actually very hard to invest, to get approval, to invest in new equipment or infrastructure, because it impacts or is presumed to impact on the natural or cultural aspects of the environment, and also in the commercial sense as well. So we're working very closely with government to try and establish grant programs, but a relatively small investment from the business, coupled with some financial support from government and some ease through the regulatory processes for approval, can lead to a significant upgrade in the guest experience, both from a sustainability perspective, but also from an accessibility perspective as well. So that's it. Just a reminder, that's the process that we're going through, business by business. It is not a journey that ends with becoming an accessible tourism business. It's an ongoing process, but it has been embraced in Western Australia, and we're very proud of some of the success that we're doing. And ultimately, we are trying to get to that place where you don't just arrive through an accessible process, through an airline. You don't just stay at a hotel that's meeting your needs, but you can get out and about, and that you can get the transport access, you can leave the cruise ship, get out through the destination and experience all that the destination has to offer, be it through tours, attractions, and the like. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today, and I hope that's been